Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast. This is regular host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me are my fellow multiverse surviving corporate
cubicle workers.
Cubicle workers, menial office workers.
Adam Zeller, aka Ridgestone.
Eric Adams, aka Xenomorphine.
Greg, also known as Still Collating.
And we are here today to talk about a comic I never asked for. I'll be quite frank.
That's fair.
But a comic I enjoyed nonetheless. So we are here today to talk about what if aliens. Or if we were to ask Eric while playing the RPG, it'd be, how does it work, aliens? Because what if
Adam that did that?
Was it Adam? I thought it was you.
He did. No, it was Adam. He was a scientist character, and he didn't know what to do, so he just said, "I got this option. How does it work?" And it just blue screened the GM.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. So, what if aliens, which is written by a lot of people: Hans Rodenoff, Adam F. Goldberg, Leon Reiser, and Brian Volk Weiss, all of which working in different combinations on different issues in the run. And Paul Reiser is credited for the concept as well.
Is that a relative? Do we know?
Yeah, it's his son.
There you go. So it's a family of there.
Leon Reiser's his son. Art is by Guiu, Guiu, Villanova.
I'm sure you butchered that.
Oh, no doubt. With colours by Yen Nitro, who we have seen multiple times in Marvel's run on Aliens. Has he done all of them? I think he has, hasn't he? Yen Nitro. Oh, no, he started on Icarus. Oh, okay. He's only done Icarus and What If. Fair enough. I thought it kind of looked like Icarus, and that would be why.
Yes. That I did
Must
recognize.
Have been weird considering there is a subplot about Burke not getting on well with his child in this. So
why?
Considering that.
Oh, you mean because of Paul Leon doing
it's
it?
A weird vibe.
Well, you know what? After we did our Patreon episode for Underwater, and you brought up, it was either during it or after when we were talking on the recording, I can't remember, but you brought up Reboot. Do you remember?
Yes.
So
I was thinking of that during this because it's
I went and watched it, and I was like, so this is a show with Paul Reiser falling out with his character's daughter in the show,
and he used to be a kind of executive type in the studio system as well. So, yeah.
And then we have him falling out with his daughter in this, while also being written by his son. So, this was a proper family affair. So, you know what? I'll start us off on this one. I have never, what ifs, alternate realities, multiverses are a fundamental part of most sci-fi. These comics are published by Marvel, and the multiverse is so important to Marvel's longevity. And now it's creeping into the movies. They've hit that point in the movies. And recently I watched the penultimate episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I nearly forgot the name of the fucking show then. Lower Decks. And this season has been about multiverse incursions. And, that's baked into Star Trek parallel universes and everything. But one of the characters in it is going, I fucking hate the multiverse. I'm so bored of the multiverse. It's so lazy. I just keep running into other copies of my friends with different mustaches and stuff like this. And he's like, the ultimate bad guy for all this stuff that's going off is going to end up being you know, an evil version of Picard or a Borgified Kirk. And it's a very pointed sort of critique of multiverse use in science fiction at the minute. Alien has never been about the multiverse. You know, when Alien 3 came out and killed off Hicks and Newt and rendered, you know, the first 3 series as that Dark Horse had done, they didn't spin it off into another multiverse or a different continuity. They retconned their stories to fit in with this new curveball that the films had thrown them. You know, Alien has always been about the retcon. You know, when well, I suppose abandon and retcon. You know, when Prometheus came out and nullified some of AvP's stuff, yes, you can headcanon it, but the franchise moved on from that. You know, we didn't revisit much of those aesthetics ever again. I mean, I suppose you can maybe say Evolution tied into it a little bit, if I remember rightly. It's been a while since I played it through, but we move on. You know, Alien moves on. And that was why I always had a big problem with Blomkamp's Alien 3 stuff, you know, Alien 3.2, because I was like, it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work in Aliens. And even with like Life and Death, even with, Life and Death, sorry. Even with Life and Death potentially introducing time travel into the franchise, you know, Terminator is a franchise that uses time travel for alternate continuities. It's baked into it. But I always got the feeling that if Alien was ever to do it, it'd be a paradox thing. You know, what's it called when it has to happen and it's this loop thing? Causality, you know, causality, that kind of thing. I thought if Alien was to go forward with the time travel that Life and Death was introducing or hinting at, it would be a case of, you know, that's how David and his space jockey ship ends up thousands of years in the past to be fossilized and all that kind of stuff. It didn't feel like it is an alternate universe thing. And even when they did the comics, you know, when Dark Horse did the alternate scripts, it didn't feel like a multiverse kind of thing. It was here's just a visualization of a thing that could have been. You know, we're not going to set it up as its own thing. Do not expect to see more continuations of this story. We're not going to do William Gibson's part 2 and spin off from it all. Whereas this one seems to very much set up a continuation at the end of it. So, and with Avengers versus Aliens, you know, that 100% sets up multiverses within the Alien Marvel universe. So I guess that's where we're at now. But when it comes to what ifs, if I was to think to myself, I want to explore what if something had gone different in any of the Alien films. It would not be what would happen if Burke survived the events of Alien. It was just such a random fucking jumping off point that I had, truthfully, very little expectation for. And despite the opening of the comic sort of setting me off on a back foot, you know, the entire premise of his survival in the comic is an absolute fucking continuity gaff that is, you know, makes no sense. But despite that, I really enjoyed this. It's humor in the Alien franchise done well. And I don't know if that's just because I went in with lower expectations or I went in with the expectations that it was going to be something, I don't want to say silly because I don't necessarily think it was silly, but it was just funny. It was sitcom-y. And I don't think that's a bad thing. You know, there's a reason it's sitcom-y. Adam F. Goldberg, one of the writers for it, is the showrunner on The Goldbergs. You know, a 10-year running sitcom. Paul Reiser, of course, is known for his sitcom work prior to Aliens and after Aliens. So, you know, there is a certain humorous element to it. But yeah, there's a few foul ups in continuity as it goes on. It's not just that setup. There's other bits and pieces in there as well. But it was consistently fun. And it somehow turned Burke into I don't want to say likable character, but a character who wasn't irredeemably, trash. It tries and it works through the humor in this. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised at how well this went down. Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you because I'm very curious as to your thoughts on this, because of you've said in the past, jokingly, about The Office in an aliens sort of environment, and there's a part of this series that very much felt like The Office. So yes. I was like, I mean, I even think one of the characters looks like Creed from The Office. So I don't know how deliberate that is, but
I also thought there was one I'm pretty sure one of the characters are a reference to Office Space because he looks so much like Milton, the red stapler guy in it.
Milton?
Yeah, the first guy they interview, he looks a lot like Milton in Office Space.
I've not seen Office Space. Is that a separate? So that's something entirely different to Office.
You need to watch Office Space, Aaron, immediately.
It's a very good parody of Office satire life. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let you give us your
similar humor. Yeah. This is basically an entire comic where they went, you know what we should do? Let's turn Burke saying, I'm really an okay guy, into an entire story, an entire thing. I would say the comedic lines and stuff, they work. You get Burke's voice sounds like this is Burke, definitely. There are definitely some continuity gaffs, even down to a big crux of the story where it turns out, spoiler alert, you will be getting them instead of a normal chest burster, it's a queen chest burster, and it's earlier than a normal one instead of taking days.
I have that exact same note written down.
Yeah, and yet it's a pillar of the story. And there could have been ways where they could have, the victim could have been inaccessible and they took longer to retrieve him, or they could have gone around it like that. To put this, I think the art was really good, especially of the aliens and even some of the human poses. There's a really good one that doesn't have anything to do with the creatures, and it's just Burke's daughter, and she's kind of leaning on a kitchen counter, and I thought that's a completely realistic pose. There's some great little poses like this. The aliens look dynamic in their movement, stuff like that. The artwork is really nice. But I think it's plot-wise where it does trip up, and there is this kind of revisionist take on Burke. Scott Middlebrook, he did Alien Timeline Universe, I think his YouTube channel's called. He points out a lot of the gaffs in this, but he was saying he was hoping, and when he pointed this out, I thought, actually, that would have worked, but this was a fever dream, and then Burke wakes up and he's cocooned. And I thought that actually could have worked because it would have explained some of the continuity errors. It's not. This is literally an alternative series of events, and when you keep on getting rammed with this thing, no, it's all, you've got me wrong. I don't kill people. You have to kill people. I can't. I would never do that. Literally minutes after he's literally on the Salico, and Mr. Yutani says you have to tie up the loose ends. And he was literally going to do that. He was going to eject the Marines into vacuum so he wouldn't have any loose ends. That doesn't gel with what we know of Burke's character. The dialogue stuff mostly does. Sometimes there are some inappropriate, witty one-liners, but I feel this is a situation you shouldn't be cracking jokes in because it alleviates the tension, and it's a scene where the tension should be high. There's a scene where him and the daughter get out of a cocoon and there's an egg right open, and I thought, oh, this is going to lead to some drama because there's going to facehugger comes out. It doesn't. They just run away, and I thought you squandered. It's an interesting take, but it's because they do keep ramming this home of I'm really an okay guy. No, really, I am an okay guy. And I think there could have been a really interesting story if Burke had survived, but he is still a sociopath. And what do you do with a sequel? You try to raise the stakes. So you could have had him trying to screw over people in Wayland Yutani. And Burke is not a comedic character. He was played by Paul Reiser, who has the stand-up background, but he's actually quite a dark character. And I think it was a shame that this story kind of misses out on that element of him. He's trying to redeem himself. And also there are a lot of moments where it's like the entire galaxy of humanity, they all know about the alien. They know what he did, yada, yada, yada. And you're thinking, how would anyone know that? And also he says, oh, I hope Ripley takes the company down just after he's got a lifetime contract with Wayland Yutani. It's a bit schizophrenic in that regard. But as long as you just want a story with aliens in it, and there is some light-hearted humor, it works well as light-hearted humor, but there are those little errors where you think it could have been better than it was. But yeah, things happen. Aliens get loose. Aliens get loose right at the end, which is an interesting choice. Usually there's little red herrings and stuff before then. But yeah, there's some callbacks to the Alien novels with the stuff they're drilling for in the mines, and they have mini power loader suits. There are a lot of callbacks. It's an entertaining little story, but yeah, I think it could have been better if they had focused on he's not an okay guy. He's just on the verge of being a serial killer, and open that Pandora's box. I think that could have been more interesting.
Yeah, it's because they lean into the comedic elements. You know, in a lot of ways, it's not Burke, it's Paul Reiser, and you know it leans into that aspect, and it leans into the, like I said, the sitcom background of the creatives behind it.
I have to say, anyway, Paul Reiser has never looked better in artwork.
Apart from the last issue.
Likeness.
The last issue, I think, was all over the place in terms of his likeness. Personally, but anyway, sorry. Greg, how about yourself?
Okay, well, coming into this, first of all, I'm not really sure when would I have read this if I wasn't asked to help do a podcast review on this comic. So, well, I've heard interesting things that people were surprised that it's more compelling than the premise set would incline. But I also I agree with both aspects. A little what Aaron said and a little what Eric. I also was never a fan of trying to theorize and maybe put the potential of multiverse in the Alien franchise. I'm also of the opinion that the Alien franchise works best if it's grounded as much as possible. The first few movies have the classical sci-fi tropes that are not too hard sci-fi, but all of the rest of the elements could be, and it's basically normal people just a century from now in space. What happens when you combine with company politics and an unknown creature, etc. I was so never really. I'm generally in other films as well. I'm also really not a super fan of the constant multiverse thing and Marvel movies and etc. And with time travel, I rarely enjoy it. Only if it has that good enough character. I'm a fan of Doctor Who, so there I'm okay with it. But generally, I'm not too much of a fan of time travel, and definitely not in the Alienverse. So I was never really happy with a potential direction that such entries could take there. But ever since the the alternate scripts for Alien 3, I enjoyed it. I wasn't too happy about the art with the alternate Alien 3, but the story was nice. And over the years, I've kind of gotten around to it and generally thought that, yeah, if anywhere, it would probably be the best that to explore alternate takes would be in comics. In novels, you can do a lot with the details, but Alien being such a visual spectacle, it deserves to be visualized. And in a comic is a great opportunity for that. So I was always then under the impression that in the comics you can do these just what if before official what ifs, like what if we had this alternate continuity, what if we had a different scenario. I'm also of the opinion, like some of you hear, that Alien 5 one day, the Blomkamp version, would be probably a good idea for a comic adaptation as an alternative script. But so when we saw that, of course, Marvel had the comic rights, we knew that there would be crossovers, and I already just kind of put it in my mind. Okay, that's not even so much for me as a multiverse in the sense, but just alternate possibility stories. What if bar tales? Like what would happen if we combined these and these characters and stuff? And I was okay with that. But like Aaron said, the last thing anybody would have expected, and me also, was having a what if story of Burke. And especially since we've had that in Bug Hunt, the anthology series, we've had that short story with Burke there. If I remember correctly, it was his kind of final moments and reminiscing when he was cocooned, that had that editorial mishaps in the writing there. But even though we've got the story there, which we weren't even expecting in Bug Hunt, I would have been like, okay, so that part is explored and done with. And to have the first kind of what if possibility with such a story was very unexpected. But then going into it, I was expecting a fun and silly tale. So I kind of went into maybe it'll be something like Hercmondo in the sense of outlandish aspects. I was also very pleasantly surprised how fun the general whole comic was. I wasn't expecting the story to be compelling and the characters to be as interesting as they were. Now, on the other hand, yes, there are glaring continuity errors, but again, I was kind of being more lenient since I don't take this whole thing seriously in that regard. But it was kind of funny and silly. Okay, the first premise, how he escapes, and with the hiding, okay, and then we go with the crazy life cycle, and instead of a normal chest burster, you get a queen chest burster that literally doesn't even look like a queen chest burster, but like a miniature actual adult queen. And then literally grown up in a few minutes, and other things, silly shenanigans happened. But then combine it with the endearing characters, and for again a what if that I wasn't even taking seriously, I was very, very, very surprised with how good the art was, which again, for a comic medium, for me is extremely important to have good art in the comic. And especially if you can draw aliens well, and we've had experience with previous Marvel entries that the alien depiction is kind of subpar at times. But having seen that this person could draw aliens really, really well, and the alien queen looked fantastic in so many panels, I was like completely on board there, and I'm just happy to have, for a visual reference, some great panels that I will remember there. And again, I was constantly asking myself, why are we getting such good art in a what if? Why didn't we get that in other main line comics? So that was strange there. I did enjoy, again, some of the elements of the story, which we'll get into deeper later. But as Eric says there as well. I did get constant whiplash in the sense of Burke's character being focusing so much on that. Yeah, I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy, but uh, I kind of felt that again before this comic. There were some entries like in River of Pain. I always really remember the parts of that novel that retold Ripley waking up in Aliens, etc. How Burke was portrayed and commented on as being almost mustache twirling, kind of sleazy, and I always thought that was a bit much. That was a bit. It kind of painted his character too evil in the sense that in the movie he's opportunistic. He's evil and crazy by the end in the sense that what he was probably willing to do, but he wasn't that kind of super obviously sleazy evil, as in a cartoonish portrayal of a villain. But now, in this comic, we get the complete opposite depiction, where he's like, "No, no, I never would have done it." Oh, so it's basically Ripley survives because of Burke, because he could have killed her, but no, he decided to let her go, and then, oh
And
no,
not just that, but he's
Yeah.
got this kind of go get 'em kid sort of thing, which in the film, in Aliens,
yeah.
he uses kind of sarcastically, chin up little buddy. But here he's truly meaning it. Oh, I hope she takes down the company.
Yeah, that was that was the first of many whiplashes with the character. Again, seeing in Aliens, he didn't have a good relationship with her, especially by the end when she was going to pin him to the wall, in the sense make him go to jail and everything. He was friendly with her at the start and encouraging in the APC, etc. But again, to be at the end, oh no, well, I'm gonna make sure that you live and go get him and everything. And then again in the office, so he's planning to do all this. They try to set up some motivation that okay, a bit far fetched, but I get it. But then you're trying. It's constantly. I constantly felt like the writers there were trying to have their cake and eat it too, in the sense of how they were portraying Burke there. So it it was confusing. It was confusing, and especially at the end. Spoilers. We'll get into details probably more later. But what was the biggest whiplash for me was you were doing everything there to save your wife, and then at the very end, where you can try to get to that ship and wrestle the control off of the Yutani guy. It's like, no, it's time to give her up. It's time. You know what? I am going to save all of my colleagues that kind of hated me, that I was thinking of maybe sacrificing them, maybe not. And no, she's there, but no, now I'm gonna do it. It was like, what? Right now, all of a sudden, you don't know she could have been implanted right there and there. So you could have been literally a few minutes late deciding to do that. But at the end, no, he's gonna try and find her, but he has no idea if she's alive or not. So that whole thing is kind of crazy, and especially at the end, yeah, it felt kind of almost a fan fiction, in the sense that even the office crew were like, yeah, you know what, you're not so horrible after all. Yeah, well, it's like they forgot, because of him the creature was there and it killed their colleagues. They could have been accidentally the ones who were killed, but no, we will forgive you, we will help you, we will save you, no problem. uh, of course, yeah, he did. He could have been portrayed more as an opportunistic thing there. Okay, you helped us, we're gonna help you. You didn't do it on purpose, but still, oh, we forgive you. No, it doesn't matter that you caused the deaths of people here. So it was kind of crazy sometimes with the characterization. But again, it was fun. I actually really enjoyed the comic for what it is when you look at it in the context of a silly, fun uh, Paul Reiser taking the control, in the sense of this is, as said, more Paul Reiser than Burke. How would they react in a situation like this? Yeah, it is left open ended in the sense that there could be a continuation. Would I read a continuation of this story? Probably, to just see what happens, but not so much as in interested to see it go there. But yeah, I liked it. I was happily surprised with it.
Cool. Adam, how about yourself?
I don't know if I'd say I liked it, but I would say I was amused by it. I didn't quite know what to expect when I first heard about this one. When I saw those initial covers and I saw the premise of Burke surviving, and we were going to follow his story, and from the covers we could tell he was much older, so this would be a time jump into his future after Aliens. But as I started reading it, I was like, oh, this is just a straight up comedy, pretty much. And it was interesting once I don't have an issue with that. It's not something I typically expect out of an Alien story, but I kind of have to respect it for trying something different in that regard. And yeah, it's funny you bring up Office Space, Eric, because that was the thing that first came to my mind when I was reading through it. I was like, this is Alien meets Office Space, pretty much, which is a great movie. Aaron, you do need to watch that.
I googled it. It's the one with the infamous fucking him on the what's his name? What's the main guy's name?
I can't remember, but it has the famous poster with the guy covered in Post-it notes.
You see that meant
Jennifer
nothing
Aniston early role as well.
Oh, no, hang on. I've got it's pissing me off. I can't
Gary,
remember.
what's his name? He's the guy who says, right, we need you to come in on Sunday.
I'm thinking of
another film.
Gary Cole.
Yes.
Okay.
That meme of him, leaning on top of the office cubicle.
Yeah. And he's like that the whole way through. He's a great portrayal of a office manager type.
I had no idea that's what this was from. I thought
watch it.
I think that Milton character's Boyle's dad in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Anyway, yes, check it out. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I'm definitely due for another rewatch of that one. But that's what it immediately reminded of as it was progressing into this story of his, where he's stationed on this mining asteroid that has this giant, like, Truman Show holodome with a sky, and his daughter is working in the mines, and they're estranged. Yeah, there's some logical issues, as you mentioned. I mean, first of all, the thing that frees him after he gets hived is the explosion of Vasquez and Gorman sacrificing themselves, even though technically the hive is supposed to be an atmosphere processor, which is quite a ways away from that location. And at first I was like, oh, is that just a weird transition? It's like, no, because he meets up with Ripley and goes up the same elevator as she does. Well, the same elevator shaft. So I'm like, okay, that makes no sense. I guess they missed that, the geography of the atmosphere processor and the colony complex on that one. But I mean, whatever. Like you were saying, Greg, this is not really a story you can take too seriously.
It does make me wonder how that got past consultants and Fox, though, or studios. Sorry, I should say.
But as well as, like, I was thinking, wait, what's this, like, pressure with her lungs thing? We've never heard anything about this in the Alien universe, and it turns out it's just a story that her father told her, so she would stay on this asteroid. I'm like, really? You never, like, looked into this a little bit? Like, you hate your father, but you're just going to take his word for this one? All right. So there were some.
He's not an okay guy.
There's some definite gaps of logic in this, but as an alien, and not to mention, the queen chestburster gestation time, but not only that, the growth time, like it skips an issue, and his android sidekick character is immediately killed by the queen chestburster, which looks like an adult queen chestburster. It's weird. And then before we know it, like, literally he's run down the hall and she has an established hive and is laying eggs and is full grown. So it's you cannot take this seriously if you want to have a good time with it.
More than that, she actually has grown adults as well in the nest with them.
To be fair, that doesn't come until they're knocked out and hived up.
Yeah, but they would have had to have been hived by the adults because the queen's just kind of in a bungee
I suppose
cord.
true.
But this is very fast paced, very funny. I would say it's silly, Aaron. I know you didn't think it went that far, but I would categorize it as silly. But it was still a fun ride. I thought the art was decent.
It's some of the best, I think. And I know we say that's not much of a benchmark considering Marvel, but Icarus. Well, no, it's not the same artist, is it? It's the same colorist as Icarus. Yeah, sorry.
Well, the color was good too.
I think it's one of the best looking Marvel comics.
Yeah,
there was some weird anachronistic design choices. I felt like the cars looked like 1980s, 90s cars, and the office environment is very 1990s.
Yeah.
Design choice wise, I think it was an oddity. The artwork itself, yeah, I liked.
Well, and as far as the whole multiverse thing, I don't typically take something as an actual multiverse thing unless that factors into the story itself, like the MCU has done, like Star Trek has done. If it's just like, hey, this is an alternate continuity tale, like we saw with Alien, the original screenplay, or William Gibson's Alien 3, like you can't really categorize that as an actual multiverse, I think. So I really hope Alien doesn't go in that direction. And I don't see, yes, we tiptoed there with the filming of the Predator and with the ending of Life and Death. But I don't think we've ever full bore done well. You can't, dude. Aliens and Avengers, come on, you can't really count that the crossover.
That's the thing now. It's
I do not count that.
In Marvel's
Otherwise,
Alien, there's now Marvel Alien Multiverse.
Okay, maybe in the Marvel world, but
in the End Game or whatever it was, Peter Parker referenced aliens as a film, so it's not going to be official either. The thing that got me was that Burke clearly sends Ripley off to the prison planet as per Alien 3, so you're assuming, she doesn't encounter the facehugger, and yet later on it's clear they found a canine hybrid alien remains on that planet. So Alien 3 does and simultaneously does not happen. That part was a little weird.
Okay, well, let's just get back to Adam. Let him finish off his thoughts.
So yeah, overall, I was amused by it. I don't know if I'd recommend it, unless you're curious about what an alien comic would be. An alien comedy would be. Yeah, I know I made no sense there. An alien comedy, what that would be. But it was charming. I can't deny it was charming. It was very oddball for me, especially when it went into the romance between the Yutani character and his daughter. So there was a number of issues I had with it. But overall, I'd say it's worth a read if you have the curiosity of what an alien comedy is. If that sounds bad to you, this is not going to be your jam at all. And I'd recommend skipping it if you're like, oh, well, the Predator was terrible and that's the Predator trying to be a comedy. I'm like, yeah, this is like Alien trying to be a comedy. If that sounds interesting to you, give it a read. If it doesn't, I would skip it.
I think it's kind of helped out by that idea of it being a what if, an Elseworlds kind of thing, because you can kind of be like, I'm not going to take this too seriously. It's just an interesting curiosity, an interesting oddity to the side. I think if it was a main line or a main, next main Alien series, and it was trying to be this funny, I'd probably hate it. But knowing what it is, knowing that it's a Paul Reiser thing, knowing that Adam Goldberg's working on it, I really forgive it and really get into it for that intent, because I know full well going into it what it is. It's not like, don't get me wrong, I hate Resurrection's attempts at comedy, but that's because Resurrection feels like it's taking the piss out of itself. This one is... It doesn't feel like a parody. It doesn't feel like it's insulted by itself. It's just embracing something else. I don't really know how to describe it very well there. There's different types of funny, and this one works with what it's trying to do, in my opinion.
I think the thing with Resurrection, the problem with the humor was very slapstick, so it didn't suit the tone. Here, it suits the tone a bit better, but like, for instance, when I said earlier, like some of it seems a little inappropriate, they come across some like warehouse workers, and previously they just said, "Oh no, there's nobody here. It's just robots." And there's a quite horrific scene of them in cocoons and stuff. And he said, "Oh, well, in fairness, I don't go down here. I just assumed it was robots." It's kind of like Firefly humor. But because it's juxtapositioned against that, it feels a bit like the scene in Resurrection where Ripley comes across those clones, and then you get Jonah saying, "Oh, must be a chick thing." So it kind of borders on that. I wouldn't say this is a comedy. That's the thing. It's not a comedy alien story, but it is sprinkled with humor.
I would not
in the
say
s-
that. Every other line of dialogue is a fucking joke. dude.
Yeah,
Like-
but what I'm saying is there's definite horror in there, and I would say it's like Terminator 3, which ironically there's something ripped right out of, which is when his Burke's daughter and this Hiro Yutani guy, they just fall in lust very quickly. You have the synthetic going, "Oh yes, I noted your spiked pheromone levels, blah blah blah. He's definitely got sexual attraction." That is ripped straight out of Terminator 3. So I think if you regard Terminator 3 as a comedy, fair enough. I think Terminator 3 is an action film with comedy in it. That's why I think this isn't an out-and-out comedy, but there are definitely moments of comedy in it.
I would disagree there, buddy. I think the comedy permeates this entire run. You know, it's like Adam said, every other fucking line in it is a joke, I think. But I mean, that's not to say that the situation isn't serious or the artwork isn't serious, but Burke's reaction to everything basically is comedic in tone. And I find a lot of it works. For me personally, I can see a lot of people disliking this, you know, especially if you are a more serious person. But I mean, it was things like the franchise kind of hopping that shouldn't work, but the whole "are you a replican or a replicant" thing, and you know that's so fucking stupid. Because like the character, it's what's his name, Cygnus, says to Burke, you know, there's no such thing as a replicant. I don't know what you're talking about, but it's obviously a Blade Runner reference, and I found it fucking hilarious.
yeah, and I
That
was
was
a bit
one of the
sad
better ones.
how quickly that android character got offed between issues, you know, completely off screen, because I liked the dynamic between those two.
Well, he's a major character as well, which was a little. But I mean, if you're going to talk about the tone of writing, I've done a quote here, which is directly from the comic. I have to wonder if they didn't do one draft and they kind of like ran it past Paul Reiser and he went, because like for instance, there is several instances where this facehugger they're chasing gets caught in midair, whacked, thrown
3
into a vent, and it
times.
happens over. And Bert literally says, "Either I'm having terrible deja vu or the same stupid thing keeps happening over and over again!" Exclamation mark. Facehugger leaps at someone, get caught in midair, gets thrown to the side and escapes into the vents, question mark. And Burke is literally going like that. It's like that meme that goes, "Oh no," sort of thing. So I have to wonder, did they come up with this stuff? And then Paul Reiser or someone went, "You know what?" But that harmed it because you're reminding the audience of how silly that is to keep on happening.
But
And
the
yet it
self
starts out with they just do a retread of Aliens for about half the issue. And they waste time by doing that.
it does feel very self-aware, and to be fair, I thought that was a strength of it. I enjoyed that moment where Burke's calling out the ridiculousness that was going off, and I think that's why I find it so effectively funny, because it is self-aware.
I mean, it's funny, but I felt it's too on the nose. And like we were saying, like Alien Resurrection, it's a little too on the nose at that point, because he is calling the primary character is calling out his own story for bad writing. And if it had been like a point of irony or something, that would work. But he is literally saying this is stupid writing to the reader. So for me, I'm going, yeah, it's that should have been a point where the editor should have gone, redraft this, redo it, make them do something different, instead of having the character tell the audience this is stupid, because it's not feeling clever. Like I said, like in Firefly, they would do things like that, but they would make it clever. And here, it's not done cleverly.
I also was a bit disappointed that it didn't address the egg in the Sulaco, because I was like, okay, is in this continuity, is that just not a thing? But then we see on that splash page of his android friend finding an egg for him, that he goes to Fury 161 and he finds the remains of like a dog hybrid. So I'm like, okay, so that did happen. Are we not going to address this at all? But that was an interesting splash page, because it showed like all these different worlds he had gone to and all these crazy xenomorph hybrids and stuff. Um, I think the whole premise of Yutani pinning this whole incident on Burke was very odd to me. I'm like, you guys couldn't come up with any other explanation, like the atmosphere processor just had a malfunction and went critical or some shit. Like, so I'm like, really, 150 wrongful death lawsuits are going to bring down Weyland-Yutani? I'm like, I'm sure they've had a few more than that count of wrongful death lawsuits in their history. So
Yeah. What are they,
whole
Boeing?
so that whole premise to me was a bit head scratching, I would say.
That's entirely fair.
That splash page also was such a tease when Burke was like, "Oh, where'd you get it? Please tell me." Kind of, winking at the audience, and then Cygnus goes with all of this, and I was looking so close to see all of the information, and it was kind of cool seeing those hybrids. Though some of them look a bit ridiculous, but at the same time, with the laid back kind of attitude of the comic, it was like interesting to see. But then at the end, when Burke was like, I'm gonna stop you there. It's better that I don't know, so it doesn't track back. And I was like, damn, you're right. That's such a tease. It's obviously
and
they
yet
didn't want
you have to wonder, since Alien Resurrection again, what was stopping him from just getting DNA samples from those cadavers? Like, I feel like he was only tasked with the egg, but a Burke would have went, but a corpse would have been just as fine. Oh well, like that would have lent into the humor you have here.
It had me wondering about the destruction of the derelict. I'm like, okay, are we saying the nuclear blast did destroy the derelict again now? Because like in a lot of recent stuff, it didn't. So that was kind of not addressed at all. So, but again, this is a story you just like, my alien fan brain is like, like this makes no sense. But I'm like, you can't take it seriously. You just can't
got to
with this
turn
story.
it off. You've got to turn your brain off a little bit.
It works if you let that wash over. Whereas, here's another bit of dialogue. Burke's just sitting there and he says, "Oh, no," he's talking to a random telecommunications operator, and he says, "Oh, Weyland-Yutani, they convinced the entire universe I'm some kind of opportunistic a-hole who wanted to weaponize an acid-blooded alien species." Deeds, you exactly did that, and what's more, he tries to do it again. And this is where it doesn't. Well, we've got.
Well,
I don't know if you want to read out the comment there that we've got. That's
yeah. So before we go on too much further, then, so Sarah commented in the chat that my thought was that this is all told from Burke's point of view, and nobody is a villain in their own story, which
works really well for this.
Is a very valid point, especially when you think about how much of a psychopath and that Burke actually is. How much of this is a distorted view on on his
He's
reality
a
or his
narcissist.
fantasist.
Narcissists, absolutely. I mean, I know this from personal experience. They can make themselves believe something, and they will 100% believe it, and they can make themselves go, "That didn't happen." Burke is completely that kind of character. So yeah, sociopath, all the rest of it, but he definitely has narcissistic character traits that would have completely worked.
It does. Speaking on Burke though as well, you know, like I said earlier, it feels more polarized than it feels Burke, and I think that's. See, I kind of like it, but when you put on your serious head, it's a little bit like I'm not sure this transition really works that well. I mean, people change between, you know, it leans into the time period between the film and in real life, and you know, kind of nowish release date. It's saying it's been 35 years since the events of Aliens in the context of the comic, and people change. You know, people change over time, but with somebody who was, like Eric says, portrayed as a genuinely psychotic, narcissistic kind of person. Again, it's are you turning, if you turn on the too critical and too analytical part of your brain, you can't enjoy this too much, I don't think. And I think that's when it really falls apart. So that character change does feel a little jarring.
I like the headcanoning of saying that it's Burke's fever dream before he gets face hugged in the cocoon. So it would make complete sense in with thinking of, oh, what kind of a life would he have? And yeah, it would then make sense for the strangeness and how chatty he is more in this comic than he was in Alien. So in that sense, yeah, if we look at it from his perspective, whether it be his retelling of the future events or headcanoning a fever dream or whatever, but yeah, you have to look at it through a very specific lens to get the maximum enjoyment out of this, because there are enough elements to find a fun experience with it.
Yeah, you just really cannot take this seriously. But I mean, you're right, Aaron, in that as a side story, it kind of works. Like, it's not, again, if this was presented as a mainline Alien comic, I would be like, what the hell is this? But as like a side offshoot story, I feel like it works. And you know, it's a 5-issue run, and the ending very much sets up a continuation of the story. So I would expect we'll get another run with
I
this.
really
You don't think so?
Well, maybe, but I don't want them to. You know, don't get
It's
me
a
wrong.
pretty major unresolved plot
I
point, though.
know I was capable of shutting the critical part of my brain off and enjoying this for what it is, but I would rather them go and do more what ifs like Dark Horse were doing in terms of visualizing these other scripts. I would like more of that, or more serious things, more serious what ifs. Because, like has been said, you know, there's potential to be interesting off this premise, even if it's nothing I ever thought about. You know, this full on only came about because I guarantee you one of these guys just had a random conversation with Paul Reiser, and it was just the opportunistic situation that made it happen. I would like to see them explore it in a serious way, even if I don't necessarily want to go down the multiverse route. But just these random little side stories are fine and interesting. I don't want them to continue this because I don't think it has legs, this tone. You know, we've seen that Alien isn't overly successful when it does try to be funny. You know, Resurrection pointing, you know, perfect example of that. How long would a silly alien thing be able to last if it expects you to turn your brain off?
I think they could go one more issue with this, given that unresolved plot point, and they should just go like completely off the wall. They should Fast and Furious it, where it's even more insane, where like he starts like the Earth War or something, and the entirety of Earth gets infected.
And then Burke says it's about family. Right at the end.
I might
Also-
watch that for the lulz. Yeah.
If we're going off the Prometheus like viral site, like Peter Whalen cured cancer, so his wife shouldn't even have cancer. So
Didn't say cancer, did it?
yeah.
Did it?
They do mention malignant cells, but at that point, I was
No, they say
actually
his wife has
thinking-
cancer.
I was actually thinking, it didn't quite line up with him talking to Ripley in that. I mean, it's not so much of a deleted scene because everyone's seen the special edition of Aliens, but when he talks to Ripley about her daughter died of cancer, he's very matter-of-factly about it rather than someone whose wife has that kind of condition. You kind of like, you look at it in retrospect and you go, that doesn't quite gel, maybe. But I mean, it worked as character motivation. I did like that about this. Him having and he again, it's another character who says, "Oh, it's their own condition or someone they care about." It's a Dr. Freeze from Batman thing. They are doing things for an honourable, noble end. But he is not a noble character. He is a very selfish character.
You see, that is why I love Blue Marsalis so much as well. Because they are doing a thing that benefits everybody, but they're doing it for a very selfish reason, to save their own life. And, I love that. And that was actually a thing in this that I did like, is the idea. I got a bit bored of the aliens attempting to be weaponized, so I started to really enjoy the stories that were trying to do something a little different. And in this case, it's medical purposes. I do think the way they attempted it's in this sounds a lot more silly than what Blue was trying to do in the Cold Forge and into Charybdis, because it sounds like he wants to inject acid into his wife. I think was basically how it sort of sounded in this
compounds.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, we'll just dissolve
Why
the
is her
tumors.
face melting off?
So again, it's all part of
That
that.
is
You
good.
can't take this too seriously, but that was at least something that I thought was nice. Not necessarily nice. I enjoyed about this.
Yeah, if we kind of random dovetail here, in the Transformers films, they had their standard for canon. They asked one of the Hasbro executives this, and his idea was, with the Transformers films, does it pass what's called the squint test, which is if you squint your eyes, does it kind of line up? So I think this is an example in the Alien fandom where if we looked at this comic, you breeze through the story, does it pass the squint test for being an alien story? If you forgive like the life cycle gestation thing, because we got Romulus now, that does it like crazy, the AvP films. If you look past the
You can
obvious
hand wave those
gaffs,
though.
yeah, and it has
the films.
office space type humor. Does it pass the sniff test, squint test for being a decent alien comic, or do you still have that moment that stops it from being a decent alien comic?
I don't think I would ever call it a decent alien comic. I'm going to sound so contradictory here because I did genuinely really have fun with it, but I don't think it's a good comic. Like, I would never hold it up there with the mainline stories. Not that we tend to praise the Marvel mainline stories much these days. The last 3. But I still enjoy it regardless.
So, all right, here's another thing. I think this would have worked better if they cut out some of the fluff and reduced it down. They could have, the core of the story could have been done in 1 or 2 issues. And I think it would have been a much leaner story and better for it, personally. I don't know if the rest of you think that way, but I think it would have been better for like a less is more type thing, this particular story.
But then the fluff contributes towards this POV of Burke being an okay guy after all in his kind of things, because you have the fluff of him trying to decide who in the office is going to get infected, And even if the intent was, yeah, we're going to cut it out before it actually bursts and everybody be alive anyway, it's still this funny moment of him interviewing these people and trying to determine who's actually a jerk, who's worthy of having this. That's the fluff.
His character in Aliens doesn't do that. That was my point. He doesn't do that. So this is a kind of a new side being brought in. If you represented Burke as he was in the films, he is very cold, but he represents that Stalin quote of 1 or 2 murders and you're put in prison and 1 million deaths is a statistic. That's Burke. He can overlook that kind of stuff. He won't. He just wants to keep it on the quiet. I think you could do a kind of darkly humorous story, like a serial killer type character. You can do it, I think, but I think you can do it with keeping Burke in line as he doesn't need to do all the Office Space humor. Like for me, one of the most iconic shots with Burke is not him being slammed up against the wall. It's when he's looking through that CCTV monitor of Ripley calling for help, and you see him sweating, and he turns it off and he looks around to see if anyone's caught him out. And I think Hicks says, Bishop said, oh, it's so much long for the dropship to come here. He said, oh yeah, good. And he has this kind of very guilty look on his face, but you can tell he's reconciling it in his head. That's what it's all about, the opportunism for him. He doesn't care whether Ripley and Newt deserved it. He was willing to sacrifice them. And in this story, it's being brought in because they want an office humor moment. But it didn't need that. That's my point. I think you could have had Burke in the story. Don't need that, because to me, that doesn't feel in character with Burke. Burke will totally say, who won't be missed? Or he would simply say, I need volunteers. We're going to send you off world. And he wouldn't care who walks in as long as he doesn't need them.
But they are, regardless of whether we agree with it, they are trying to redeem him in some fashion in this, whether we agree that he'd be capable of it or not. That is
I
the direction they're going.
I think he doesn't need redemption in the classical sense. He just needs to use his strengths in a way which will save the day. And he might do it in a way where he didn't mean to, but he kind of saves the day anyway. But he does it because he is an opportunistic and maybe he's trying to backstab somebody else who's higher up, and it ends up that he saved the day like that. Something like that. You don't need to have someone say, I'm going to bust out the pulse rifle and yes, get behind me, guys. You had that hero moment in this, which I felt it kind of works, but I'm not doing that moment like we had in Aliens where Ripley gets in the power loader and all the audience goes, yeah, we have that here, but I don't feel like going, yeah, for Burke, because I know what Burke done and the kind of character he really is.
And that's another question, isn't it? Burke is really irredeemable.
Yeah.
So why?
This is where I'm past that.
This is where I'm like, this is. Yeah. So in that point of view of him being irredeemable, why bother? And that's why they lean so heavily into the funny aspect of it.
Comedy. But that's why I say it could have actually been funnier if they'd have gone for the dark humor. But they don't do dark humor here. They do light humor. And it works for what it is as a story, but the story doesn't line up with this is the character from the film. This is almost like Burke had a twin brother kind of thing, and or like was said in here, like the whole fever dream, or this is actually from his point of view, and it turns out he died at the end, but then that's his daughter has a complete from a certain point of view kind of thing, and he actually didn't save those workers and blah blah blah.
What do you think, Adam? Was it worth even trying to redeem Burke, or is this literally just because the opportunity fell in the lap to work with Paul Reiser?
I mean, no, it wasn't worth it. And in the story, when he has this kind of heroic moment, it's still a very scrappy kind of heroic moment. Like, plenty of his office workers died. So there was a lot of collateral damage there. So yeah, I think it's one of those heroic moments where it's an intentional kind of like, oh, he gets to be a hero, even though well, I mean, I guess his, you do have the subplot of his office workers who didn't like him, and now they do like him because he came back for them. So he does get that little win. But I mean, he's still the same sleazeball he always was. Although it does really paint him in a much more positive light than he was seen in Aliens throughout this whole thing. And there's this weird like, oh, I've changed, and it's like, no, you're still just you're still just in it for yourself, really, until the very, very end of the story where he decides to go back for his office workers. So yeah, it's just an oddball, silly story for me, but I can kind of roll with it.
What makes that so weird is that it starts off by retelling that portion of Aliens where
In a
he
totally
has a
serious
moment
tone.
like that, and he says, "Do something, Gorman," and he runs off to save himself. So it kind of feels in juxtaposition with the very bit of Aliens they chose to retell, which is the yeah.
And that's odd too, because it's in a totally serious tone, that bit that they retell from Aliens. I will say it's also kind of odd that this is the second time in recent Alien Marvel memory that we've had a Yutani son who's like the underappreciated one or something.
Well, I don't think he was a son in Thor, Descendant, was it? Was he one of the many cousins or something?
Okay, well, Yutani family member, whatever.
Well, they've really started diving into them over the last decade, haven't they? We have the Yutani in Blackout. We had the
Blackout,
Yutani in
Vasquez.
Origins. Yeah, in Vasquez as well.
Gonna have one in the series.
Was the one in Aftermath as well?
Was there?
At the very end?
Something is ringing a bell. It's possible, but yeah, it's clear that they're using the Yutani side as a representative, because Peter Wayland and anything Wayland related would be too maybe stepping on Scott's contributions there. So when they want higher up in Wayland Yutani, they're trying to probably just focus on the Yutani side. Now I understand that, but regarding Burke's, is he redeemable or irredeemable? There, of course, I agree that there kind of feels like there's a lost opportunity where you could have shown that the story that he could have quote unquote changed because he was cocooned and he finally saw that, oh, maybe such a trauma would change a person. But the problem was that most of the comic, it doesn't really make you believe that Burke regrets what they were doing. The problem is that you could have given him nightmares, flashbacks, in the sense that, oh, I did a terrible thing, I want to make up for it. But no, half of the time he says, oh, I changed, I'm a better person. But the other half of the time he goes in the sense, oh, I've always been a good person, I've never been what they painted me out to be. And it's kind of schizophrenic in that sense. You're not sure then what is the point. Have you changed, or do you just believe that you're being painted in the wrong light from the start? And yeah, I do believe it could have been a lot better done if, when he was cocooned, he's confronted with the horrible things that he did there, that he was willing to put others through, and have that emphasis that he keeps on remembering, that he keeps on having guilt because of it, and some trauma there, and then you can understand why he's trying to redeem himself. And it would even then more jive with how his daughter sees him, in the sense, because she believes that he's such a person that he's painted out to be, and that would make a bit more sense. You can put a lot of humor there still, but I think that if you focused more on that aspect, it could have made a bit more sense, and you wouldn't feel so much whiplash regarding the character. But generally, if we look at the length, the development wise, I'm happy that it was a 5 issue. Maybe some things would have been more concentrated, but I generally always hate when the comics were 4 issues, so I like having the room to breathe with 5 issues. It's a general preference, and even though there are these oddities with the character portrayal and everything, I said probably somebody just had the chance to talk with Paul Reiser and get this comic made. But on the flip side, I'm actually happy that Marvel is taking a chance with these different kinds of comics. That we could have just gotten again and again the same type of basic formulaic plot for an alien comic, but no, especially in the recent runs, we've been slowly but surely branching off into different possibilities. Probably most of them will not be followed through, but we were not sure when Marvel took over the comics that will they have the bravery to try different things. I'm honestly kind of happy that we may be able to return to some of that dark horse craziness, in the sense that willingness to try different things. So
It's
yeah, I'm happy that we have given it a chance and seen what's out there. So
Dark Horse certainly did try their hand at these kind of offbeat, perhaps not quite the same kind of offbeat humor, but Dark Horse had some wild shit like what was it, Pig,
Jerry,
Lovesick, Mondo
Mondo
Herc.
Pass,
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, regardless if I'm rolling my eyes at it and thinking it's silly, I gotta respect it for just trying something different. So as an occasional offshoot kind of alien comic, these things are interesting to see. You're more experimental, more out there kind of stories, and so I think it works in that regard, definitely. And I honestly would like to see one more. Because I'm like this invested now. I'm like, okay, I want to see, does he save his wife? Like, what's the deal here? What's going to happen on Earth? So what's going to be the conflict when they catch up with the Yutani guy? So
I suppose it speaks to its success as well that we are capable of shutting down that too serious parts of our brain and just enjoying the humor and enjoying what it was doing with the narrative. So it was, at least for me, and I guess for Greg and maybe Adam, I'm not really sure, and Eric here, but it was successful in making me turn that off and just rolling with it and enjoying the humor. And it did some cool other little asides as well. We've mentioned the thing with it being a non-weaponized alien kind of thing, but there's also little bits of other kind of lore that it was nice to see, even if they did gaff up some bits. But things like the Kelland Mining Corporation being mentioned. Eric said at the very start of it that was a reference to. Well, I think he talked more about Triman out there, but he was referencing Out of the Shadows. Kelland is from that as well. So that was cool to see them back, because I think this is technically the second appearance after Out of the Shadows. There is a little bit of a gaff in its own right, because Kelland is owned by Weyland-Yutani and Out of the Shadows. And every time they reference the asteroid they're on, they do reference it as a Kelland facility. But then they also always talk about working for Weyland-Yutani. But within the narrative of the comic, they never mention that Kelland is a subsidiary of Weyland-Yutani. So it's a bit of a fluff up there. But I thought it was still cool actually getting to see Kelland back, because I have a huge soft spot for Out of the Shadows.
Yeah, Kellen. Yeah, I do agree that with somebody who's going into the comics would be just confused, probably, that the connection between the Kiln Mining Company and Weyland-Yutani isn't they're purely established. But yeah, for people that know Out of the Shadows, I think it made sense in the comic. They're just referring to it either as one or the other. Of course, one is a subsidiary of the other, but it would make sense that Weyland-Yutani, that has Burke as its employee, sends him off to a company that is a subsidiary and just on an asteroid. Though one of the things that most made me laugh was at that very start, where first we had the serious scene, but then talking to the Yutani guy when he was like, I want a permanent contract for life, and I want dental. I was like, okay, so this is the type of direction we're going to be going with
setting the
comic.
tone right there. Yeah.
Yeah, the dental I will remember.
Shall I read off some of the comments that people left us on Facebook when I asked what people thought of the
Go for it.
run?
Can I ask first, because Adam and you had a bit of a disagreement earlier about whether you want it to be continued. Do we know if it sold enough units to probably justify a sequel?
I have long stopped keeping track of the sales, but Marvel sold significantly higher in the early days when I was keeping track of like run 1 and 2. Marvel sold significantly higher copies than Dark Horse did at its most successful. At Dark Horse's most successful.
Because I'd imagine at least the first issue sales, there would have been a lot of interest because you have the novelty factor of Paul Reiser being involved, which is like with Prometheus, you had a lot of novelty factor of H.R. Giger and Ridley Scott together, whereas the enthusiasm petered out. So it'll be interesting to see where the later issues fell sales-wise.
Well,
Was it on the level? Or
if one of you wants to read out the comments instead, I will go have a look.
So Samuel Hand says, this was a great comic. I hope Marvel continues with other what if alien stories. Like maybe what if the Nostromo crew obeyed quarantine procedures? Or what if the baby queen emerged from Ripley earlier? Okay, interesting. Devin Monens, hope I'm saying that correctly, says, I liked it. Lots of great humor, especially Burke's dauntless optimism and cheerfulness despite being absolutely rejected by everyone. I also like how they blamed Burke for Alien 3, the film so bad only Burke could have caused it. Haven't checked the references in the 2-page spread on the hunt for the Xeno egg, so nice world building there. A little confused why so many colonists survived and felt it could have been a standalone story. I place it in the top half of Alien comics, maybe not as high as the top quarter. We'll have to see where they take it from here. Scott Middlebrook, our own SM, said, mediocre at best, directionless, didn't know what it wanted to be or who Burke was going to be, and fraught with shitty continuity errors. Ian Yates says, why did I think that was Charlie Sheen for so long? I was thinking an Alien X2 and a Half Men crossover would be pretty wild. Let's see here.
it's definitely a take.
Jamie Wars has enjoyed this, very humorous, and gave a new spin on Burke. I could see this as an animation. Christopher Moriarty, I hope I'm saying that right too, says, I love the series. Headcanon for me is that this is the way it went down. I'd actually enjoy seeing a modified version of this produced as a film in the series and obviously starring Paul Reiser. I wouldn't hold your breath for that one. Roy Fry says, a fun read. I loved it. Lewis James says it was funny and showed some potential redemption for Burke while keeping up hidden his deceptive qualities. I enjoyed it. So overall, it seems kind of trending positive among the comments we got there.
The website I used to use to track sales doesn't seem to have the sales information up.
I don't think they're very public about that stuff anymore.
They used to, I mean, like prior to Marvel, I was keeping track of it through Dark Horse's stuff, and at least the early parts of it. But yeah, I'm not seeing the specific issue numbers anymore.
I personally did enjoy Cygnus's character a lot as well.
Oh, he was so funny.
I love that he constantly kept lowering and lowering the survivability chance. It was quite enjoying to see such a portrayal.
We also have Sarah's thoughts on it here in our Patreon chat. She says, my thought was, this is all told from Burke's viewpoint and nobody is a villain in their own story, because I didn't take this as a redemption story for him.
We read that.
We read
that. Yeah.
Oh, well, fuck. Sorry.
Not the other comments,
but
that
the
first
comment.
one. So because I didn't take this as a redemption story for him, it was more of a reaffirmation of who Burke was, but from the point of view of how he sees himself, which is a very valid analysis of the structural narrative.
Is everybody tapped out for talk on this one then, do we think?
There's not really too much to discuss on this one, I don't think. I think we pretty much covered it. But if you're curious about a comedic alien story, give it a read.
I would just like to add that I would love to see this artist return again on a different alien story, because the art was pretty well done, and I would like to see aliens look like this.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
That's a really nice thing.
As opposed to Trace Toys. It is preferred.
Did we get a backstory for the cover on the first issue, which is really well done? It's a Burke looking down at a facehugger, and there's a queen behind it, but the facehugger has a knife stabbed through it. Do we know what the...
Oh,
that didn't happen in the story.
No, Adam must have been fucking angry throughout the entire singles of this series. He doesn't like it when the comic art doesn't represent the story inside it.
It's just sometimes it's just what's expected with comics.
That excuse did not float when we were talking about Predator the Preserve, Adam.
That's true.
You were livid, foaming the mouth.
I wasn't that angry, but with John Schaefer, I was like, "This. Why is this making like a? Oh my god! Here's this tense moment between these two main characters, and it just does not happen. Like if it's a general alien thing, maybe I can forgive it a bit more, but like I don't know. I'm not waiting for him having a queen looming behind him in the story. Like it's not to that level, I think."
I agree with the new comment we've got.
You got to read it out.
He's a Redeemicant.
It's an allusion to the Replicant thing, whereas Burke said Redempty can't.
Oh, I think I've got chart numbers, but not sales data. So hang on.
Do you need the top of the pops music to?
I think I figured out what's that. This is what these were doing. Okay, so issue 1 was placed 21st out of however many, but it was 21st in the sales data, coming under lots of mainline Marvel stuff.
It's
and
always
DC
the number
stuff.
ones that do the best. I don't think any of the subsequent ones will be that high.
Let's have a goosey gander. Issue 2 came out in April, so it's not on the top 25 at all.
Oh, so it did go down.
Yeah, so it dropped down.
Yeah, the issue ones are always going to be the highest. It's just how comic collecting goes with Marvel, it seems.
Of course.
I'm just curious whether because it was clearly, it had sequel bait at the end. So I'm curious whether it sold enough to justify doing another.
Aliens vs. Avengers was 14th on the month it came out.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good.
That's done pretty well. I think they're on like 3 printings of that, But that's a completely aside. I need to try and chart this information again more. But anyway, shall we? Oh, no, sorry. Adams took a breath.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, we already have the next Alien Marvel series that started, which is Paradiso.
I'm really enjoying that one for now.
Yeah, I just got the first issue myself. I haven't really dived into it yet, but I'm very curious about the premise, and the artwork looks solid enough from what I've seen. So
it's really nice.
Well, I think that's about everything that's left to be said about Aliens What If, or What If Aliens. I'm not actually sure which way the title actually goes.
I think it's Aliens What If you look at the listing.
One with Burke in it.
Yeah, I wish there'd have been a subtitle on it, because that kind of implies that this is it. And I'm like, I really want more what if kind of tales. But
Aliens, okay guy, ?
It should have just been Burke in brackets.
Burke. Just Burke and the Aliens kind of font.
But yes, I think that's it for today. So we'll close off. Adam can haul us out, and then we'll say goodbye.
You can check out our main hub of activity, avpgalaxy.net, as well as we are on all the major social media channels: Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. We also have a Discord server, as well as a Steam group. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters, such as Sarah, who joined us in the chat, which is one of the perks of our Patreon supporters. Some of the podcasts we record, you can come in and communicate with us during the podcast. So check out those perks. You also get discounts on apparel, such as that nice new hat Aaron is wearing, based on an idea of the director of Alien Romulus, Fede Alvarez, and designed for us by Adam Milicevic, concept artist who also worked on that film. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us.
This has been Corporal Hicks.
Ridgetop.
Xenomorphine?
Still cool eating.
And we're replicants. Or at least I am, personally. I can't speak to the positivity of everybody else around here.
They're maybes.
Or as Sarah liked to put it, redeemer can'ts.
I'm a redeemer can.
Oh, no, Greg believes in redemption there. But thank you, everybody. Until next time.